Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Jeffrey Epstein Show. I'm your host, Bobbycapucci, and this is a morning update. Last night, we left off with the second part of the three-part series about my trip to Santa Fe. And I talked about my conversation with source number 2, and I also did a breakdown on what my day entailed as far as from the time I woke up till the time I went to sleep and everything in between. My trip to the ranch, my feelings while I was there, and then from there into the meeting with my source. So if you haven't checked that out yet, make sure you go back and you start on episode 1, and that would be Monday's episode, and then part 2 was last night's, and then we'll conclude with part 3 tomorrow. So today we have an article from the New York Post, and it has to do with the Victims Fund is what they're calling it, but I don't like to use that word. We'll call it a Survivors Fund. So, headline, U.S. Virgin Islands clears way for Jeffrey Epstein's Survivors Fund. New York Post, written by Priscilla DeGregory. The U.S. Virgin Islands Attorney General plans to stand aside and allow a Jeffrey Epstein's Survivors Compensation Fund to proceed, according to new court papers. AG Denise George says her office has reached an agreement with victims, survivors, to release liens she put on the dead pedophile's assets in January so that they can be paid through a victim compensation fund. My question is, what has changed since the last time we have talked? Okay, she talked to the survivors, I get that. But according to George, Jeffrey Epstein's lawyers, the ones who are in charge of the estate, are involved and they're complicit in his crimes. So now all of a sudden they're honorable negotiators, they're honorable people that we can deal with in this case, and she's going to, remove the liens and let these two people who she just called basically criminals still be involved in the case. Well, that makes a lot of sense. The Attorney General intends to permit the release of estate assets to allow for just compensation of survivors of Mr. Epstein through the administration of the fund, assuming that certain enhancements to the claims program are implemented, Assistant AG Carol Thomas Jacobs wrote in papers filed Tuesday in Virgin Islands Superior Court. And of course, it doesn't go into what are the certain enhancements are, right? They just say certain enhancements. So who has any idea what they negotiated? We have zero idea what Denise George negotiated in there with them. So we're just supposed to go on, all right, well, now all of a sudden it's okay. We're going to have these victim funds, and I'm going to remove the liens. So does that also mean that we're going to see work start again at these properties? Are we going to see people there mowing the lawns again, trimming trees, watching cable, whatever it may be, while at the same time money is being siphoned off of the estate, money that should, by the way, go to the survivors? It makes no sense. Denise George makes no sense, and I told you folks from the very beginning of this, she does not pass the smell test with me. She is not the person who should be in charge of this. I'm sorry. Last month, a lawyer on the estate blamed George for impeding the process of paying out the women who claim they were sexually assaulted or raped by the 66-year-old multimillionaire financier pedophile, often when they were underage. Well, look, I don't believe the lawyers either. Indike and Khan are not reliable players in this game either. So I don't really believe or put any credence into what they have to say when it comes to this battle for the estate. But like I've stated earlier, I don't believe Denise George either. The only people that I believe in this whole entire sordid ordeal are the lawyers for the survivors. That's it. They're the only ones who have been honest throughout this whole thing. Over 24 women have filed sexual assault claims against Epstein's estate seeking damages. Well, it's probably in the closer to the hundreds of the people that have been assaulted by this man. And still, some people don't want to come forward. Some people are scared. I talked to somebody recently who was so scared to come forward and talk about what happened to them because they were scared that the legacy media would ruin their lives. Imagine being terrified of the media, what they would do to your life because you thought that they would think you were a liar because of the way that they've conducted themselves for the last however many decades. What an absolute joke. It's an absolute joke in this country right now. George's office says before the fund can start paying out, certain measures need to be implemented to ensure fairness to all. Again, what are those measures that need to be implemented? It doesn't go into it here in the article. It doesn't talk about what those measures might be. So here's an idea of the way it should start, in my opinion. No NDAs. So even if the girls get money out of this fund, they should not, I repeat, not have to sign an NDA. That way they can still tell their story and people can understand what occurred. Because a lot of these times, if you take funds from one of these compensation funds, if you get money from that, you have to sign an NDA and, you waive a bunch of legal rights. They shouldn't have to waive anything. They shouldn't have to waive any sort of rights, anything. They've waited so many years for justice. They waited so many years for justice, and still, all that's staring at them is a little bit of compensation. Still no justice. Now, don't get me wrong. Do not get me wrong. Getting that money is a big deal. It helps set things right. It helps to put them back on the correct path. It helps them deal with the trauma that was thrown upon them. And with that said, I believe that there should be a separate fund set up that just deals with medical bills for these young ladies as well. I believe that there should be a fund set up for compensation, meaning money for them to start their lives anew, go to school, take care of their kids, buy a house, whatever it may be. And then the second fund, that should be for medical bills. Because it shouldn't they shouldn't have to pay out of their payments that they're going to get as far as compensation for what they suffered through. They shouldn't have to pay for their medical bills out of that. The estate should have to pay for that as well. That's my opinion, obviously. I highly doubt that'll happen, but that's something that the lawyers for the survivors should definitely try and negotiate. Why should they have to come out of pocket now after all that they suffered, after all the time they've wasted, after all the money they've already come out of pocket to seek therapy and whatnot? They should come out of pocket again? Nah, I don't think so. Epstein left behind a $634 million fortune when he hanged himself in a lower Manhattan lockup, allegedly, as he was awaiting trial on federal charges of sex trafficking. Again, there is a lot more dough here than that. If it was me, if I was the one that was looking to get some of this dough, or it was one of my family members who were assaulted and abused by Epstein and they were looking to get this dough, I would be hiring forensic accountants right now as we speak. I would want every last penny tracked. I would want to know under every mattress, in every account, under every flower pot, wherever this man might have had money stashed, I'd want it found because I want a complete accounting of this man's holdings. Okay, I don't want to hear these stupid numbers of 566 million or 634 million. More. You better ratchet that up a little bit more because there's more out there. And also, here's another thing. If you slap these MFs with the RICO charge and you start seizing money from all of the people who got money from Epstein's ill-gotten gains, boy, how much more would the pool increase? I'm sure there'd be a lot more funds going around for these victims, right? The survivors. Because guess what? The people that enabled all of this, people like Dubin and Wexner, why shouldn't they pay a financial penalty as well as a penalty of justice? They were all involved. They all enabled this, so they're going to get away scot-free. You're telling me they never enriched themselves from ill-gotten gains provided by Jeffrey Epstein? Okay. William Blum, a lawyer for the estate, said co-executors Richard Kahn and Darren Indyke hope to reach an agreement with the AG's office. But I thought that they were evil people. I thought that they were bad. I thought that they were wrapped up with Jeffrey Epstein's other businesses. So what is George taking a page out of the prosecutor's book in Florida and she's going to go and have a backroom deal with these guys? What is she getting out of it? Is she going to guarantee the Virgin Islands get themselves a fat little chunk of change or something? All of a sudden she has a change of heart, huh? The co-executors of the estate of Jeffrey Epstein look forward to meeting with the representatives of the Office of the Attorney General of the Virgin Islands with regard to Epstein Voluntary Claims Resolution Program, Bloom said. So it looks to me like George is definitely backtracking here. She's taking a step back and she's deciding, all right, well, we're going to let this fund go forward, but first I need to get some concessions. Meanwhile, none of the concessions are mentioned. Nothing like that is even talked about in the article. So here we are asking ourselves, what brought about the change of heart? And of course, she'll refer back to the survivors and say, well, they want to get their money. And I agree. This fund should have never been should have never been messed with. But at the same time, I also think that Indike and Khan should not be involved in administering this fund at all. It should be a complete and independent group of people that have no ties whatsoever to Epstein or his business dealings. There are plenty of people out there, okay? Plenty of capable people that can come in and be fair arbiters of this. But no, it always has to be the same people over and over and over again. It's like the NFL. The same retread coaches over and over again, and they just continue to fail. It's the same with these players in the Epstein case. We see the same names over and over again. And meanwhile, the survivors are stuck, left holding the bag as these morons try and battle it out in court so they can enrich themselves. That's exactly what I believe is occurring. Obviously, Indike and Khan are set to make some big dough here. And we know that Denise George's motivation is getting them islands so that she can gain some dough for the Virgin Islands. We know that that's her motivation. So that leaves the survivors standing there alone with their legal counsel battling both sides of the group here. Meanwhile, the prosecutors, Denise George, should be charging hard to make sure every single last penny goes to the survivors. Will she do that? Her track record so far does not give me confidence that that's going to occur, folks, unfortunately. But, as usual, we're watching the going-ons down there in the Virgin Islands in the battle royale over the estate, and we will be on top of this story, as we have been from the very first day it broke. If you'd like to contact me, you can do that at bobbycapucci@protonmail.com. That's BOBBYCAPUCCI@protonmail.com. Also, if you enjoy my work and you would like to help out the podcast, you can do that by clicking on the GoFundMe link or the PayPal link inside of the description box. All right, everybody, I will be back later on today with the Daily Drop. I hope you all have a fantastic Thursday.